everyone. My name is Stefan Schuster, and welcome to this episode of the Journey Running Podcast, where the goal is to help you run farther, fuel smarter, and develop character through the sport that we all know and love, ultra running and trail running. Today's episode is going to be about my experience crewing and pacing the Badwater 135. Today we're going to be keeping the theme going from the last episode where I had on my friend Danny Manimbo. He was the runner who was out there running the Badwater 135. If you're interested in hearing about his experience at the race, please do check out episode 19 of the Journey Running Podcast. With that said, this is going to mark episode 20, which is a very cool milestone in the podcast history. It has taken me a lot longer than I expected to produce 20 episodes of the show. It's definitely a lot more work and time consuming than I expected to produce a podcast, but it is a lot of fun and a very rewarding experience. Shout out to any of you who this summer came up to me and told me that you saw any of my YouTube videos at Western States, at Leadville, or if you're familiar with the podcast. I thought it was so cool when a random person on the trail or like at the race expos would come up to me and say that they had like listened or watched one of my videos. It's very different, I think, of an experience when you just see the numbers when you're like producing this stuff, whether it's YouTube views or whether it's podcast listens. But it's a lot different when somebody says hi, and then you can actually put like a face to what some of those numbers, like who those people actually are behind the numbers, right? So I really appreciate any of you guys who took the time to say hello. With that said, before we get started on today's actual episode, always want to use the intro as a good reminder for folks that I, as your host, Stefan Schuster, I'm a registered dietitian. I'm also a running coach. I'm an ultra runner. I've done 14 100 milers, including two Moab 240s. I love the sport. Journey Running is a lot more than just a podcast. It is also my business. And if you or anyone you know is looking for a running coach or a registered dietitian to be your nutrition coach, please do reach out to me. You can learn more about myself and Journey Running at the website, which is journeyruncoaching.com, or you can email me directly at journeyrunningllc with any inquiries, whether it's coaching related or podcast related or whatnot. And finally, I do sell some guides, some pre-made training plans, and just guides about nutrition subjects, strength training, stuff like that on the website, journeyruncoaching.com. There's also like a free calendar that you can download if you want and use that to, I tell people to like print it out, and you can just like write down your daily or weekly mileage on there, your goals, your training plan, stuff like that. So that's a free download if you want that on the website too. But yeah, with that said, let's dive into the episode today. Crewing and pacing the Badwater 135. So Badwater, it really is like the most unique ultra that exists for a variety of reasons. The fact that most people know that it starts on concrete. The whole race is on the side of like the road. I'm sure everyone listening to this has seen the pictures of runners running on like the white side of the white line on the side of the road so that their shoes don't melt, which is pretty crazy. So there's that aspect. There's the fact that there's no aid stations. The crew vehicle is responsible for providing all the supplies to the runner. There's the fact that it starts the race starts in waves at either 8, 9, or 10 p.m. And there's also the fact that it's, just obviously incredibly hot there. So, there's just a lot of things at Badwater that are so different than any other ultra that, as far as I understand, exists in the world. So I'm going to try my best to really like cover what all those nuances were like and like how we dealt with them as crew. I'm just going to try my best to cover them and provide a lot of like interesting insights to anyone who's running, crewing, or pacing this in the future. Let's see. So, the start of the race, Danny, who I had once again on the podcast last month, it starts on a Monday, and Danny's wave was, he was in the 8 o'clock wave. It starts at 8, 9, or 10, as Chris Kosman, the race director, likes to say. Those are the fast waves, the faster waves, and the fastest waves, which is kind of funny. Even though it's like Danny's wave started at 8 o'clock at night, it was still scorchingly hot. It was 110 degrees in Badwater Basin. It's a very unique place. It kind of just looks like if you know what a basin is, there's like a mountain basin. It's like the lower part of, where there's like mountains surrounding you. So kind of like in Badwater Basin, there's a whole bunch of rocks that are it looks like a big, it's not like a mountain, but like a hill that's next to you. And it's there's like a sign up there that says 282, or sorry, that says sea level because you're at negative 282 feet. So it's very unique being at the start line there. But because you're in like a basin, it's just like incredibly hot because that area traps just a lot of heat. So even at 8 o'clock, 110 degrees, really nuts. You got to make sure you're starting with an ice bandana, even though you are technically like starting at night, and you need full bottles, ice in your bottles, all that good stuff. But yeah, it's also crazy because technically, I think people called this like a cold year, and it was like still that warm there. Should also say that just for context, um, the race Badwater, it schedules itself on a Monday, and they do that. They schedule it like the Monday where there's like the first full moon of the month. So in 2025, the race fell on Monday, July 7th, which is pretty early for, I think, a Badwater. They considered it like a cool year, and it still got up to like 120. So I don't know what your definition of cool is, if that's it, right? But yeah, also I should say for reference, when I was like crewing this, we had 4 crew members, and all of us, or 3 out of 4 of us, paced at some point. We split our crew into 2 groups before the race. So first it was me and Janelle at the beginning of the race at the starting line, and then we had 2 more crew members, Anastasia and MJ. If you listen to episode 19 with Danny, we reference all everybody in that episode too. But Anastasia and MJ waited for us at Stovepipe Wells, which was mile 42 of the course. The reason they did that, or we did that as a team, was because we wanted 2 of the crew members to be able to get some sleep on the first night. So while they were getting some sleep on night 1, and they were also the primary pacers for Danny, it's good for 2 of your members to be well rested, and especially if they're going to be pacing in like the heat of the day on day 2 and going into night number 2. So that left me and Janelle staying up all night on night number 1 to tend to Danny's needs. I specifically requested to be up at the beginning of the race with Danny because I did want to make sure his nutritional needs, being that I am a dietitian, were being met, and that GI issues weren't going to be a factor in the first like 24 hours of the event, which I thought was the most important time of Badwater, to make sure that you're not having any issues for, a few reasons. Partially because you just want to start the race strong. There is a 14-hour cutoff at the 50-mile marker, so you want to make sure that's not something that's really on your mind if you're the runner. And also, the first day is like the hottest, so I figured if I was going to be able to provide value, it would be in that first like 24 hours of the race before, you go into a second night, and it does cool off a little bit more that second night over there. And obviously the heat is the biggest factor, or the biggest thing that increases the odds of having GI distress at races. So that's why we did that, and that's how we did that. So the other thing was, I knew that I would sufficiently stay awake for that long before I got tired and the most important part of my job was done. But yeah, let's talk about the beginning of the race. So starts at 8 o'clock. I was talking about what that Badwater Basin looks like over there. If you are a crew member who's helping your runner at the beginning of the race, there's a few challenges that you do face like right from the get-go there. The first one is that you're really faced with 2 questions, which is like, once the gun goes off and everybody starts running down the road, you got to ask yourself, how far up the road are we going to meet our runner for the first time? And the second question is, how is our runner going to recognize us and our crew vehicles from all the others? Because remembering that you're starting at night, you need a way to find your runner, and your runner needs a way to find you when there's all these other people on the side of a road in the dark. So you got to make sure that you have answers to those questions. For that first question, how far up the road did we meet our runner? We met him, the first time we met him 3 miles down the road, and that was actually too long. We were just trying to get out of some of the traffic at the beginning, but by the time we saw Danny 3 miles down the road, he had drained both of his bottles, and his ice bandana was starting to dry up too, and he needed a little extra food from us. So after that, we started meeting him every like 2 miles for the remainder of the whole first night, really. But yeah, the other thing that I should note, this is a good time to note that one of the best resources for this race is the runner guide that they hand out when you go to check-in. I think they have this on their website too, but The guide has like multiple pages that are specifically like dedicated to telling crews where like there's good parking spots along the side of the road. You just have to remember to like set your odometer from like the second that you leave the basin there, so that like when the guide says zero point 0.5 miles up the road or 5.5 miles up the road, you actually have like an accurate reading on where that spot is. The race does check to make sure that like you're doing that though. They're good about that when you leave the basin. The second question though is for that second question is how's your runner going to recognize you from all the like make sure that you're distinct from everyone else. We did two things. We held up like an electronic sign, kind of like people at the airport do. And it read Danny in like big light up letters. So that made it easy for him to find us. The other thing that we did, it is a bit harder for the crew to find the runner because everybody's got like a flashlight on and kind of looks the same in the dark. But, and I mean, there were kind of a lot of times where me and Janelle were like, oh, we found him. And then somebody would come by and it wasn't him. But we joked that he should yell something specific like caw like a bird every time he was close to us, so that we actually knew that it was him coming up as opposed to like somebody else coming up. One of the other things that was interesting was like, we were unsure, me and Janelle, who were like were starting the race crew, and we were unsure if we should cheer on runners every single time we saw them. We didn't know if they liked it. An initial thought, you want to be like supportive of all the athletes and offer encouraging words and advice and all that stuff. But a lot of people would just kind of look at us with blank stares. It happened like so many times that we actually stopped saying anything as people would go by in the dark, because we thought that they were maybe just like tired of talking in such like an intense environment and like focused on their race. The other thing that maybe the reason nobody really said anything to us was because, like, if you think of an out and back course, a race like Leadville is a good example, where there's like 500 people on that section between Winfield and Twin Lakes, and if you're saying good job 500 times to people, like that kind of gets tiring, whether you're even if you're like running and you want to be nice, it's still like a tiring thing to do. So I think maybe the athletes out there were just tired of being told stuff like that by crews so many times on that first night, because you're leapfrogging your runner every time you see him to go meet them at the next spot 2 miles up the road. But when we did see Danny, we would usually bring over to him like an assortment of items. A really good tip for anyone crewing and pacing is like, first of all, this should be obvious, but you have to park on the right side of the road there, the side that you drive on, hopefully the side you drive on. But what you got to do is you got to cross the road to meet your runner, meaning that, if you're bringing them like water or gels, electrolytes, food, lube, stuff like that, you need a way to transport that stuff across the road. Like I said already, there's no aid stations here, so you have to make sure you're getting everything across efficiently instead of just like throwing it all in like a bucket. You could do that. The way we did it was we got like a portable container with like multiple compartments, kind of like one of those toiletry kit or bags. And so we'd basically put like 2 new water bottles, one with Scratch, which was the electrolytes we used. We put some fruit, gel, avocado rolls, some lube, anything else that our runner requested. That portable kit was super, super, super helpful. I highly recommend swinging by like a Walmart before the race and like picking stuff like that up. And then the other thing we would bring is like a fresh ice bandana or like a cup of ice to put like so Danny could like put ice in his hat or his buff or anything like that. Got to make sure you're staying cool out there. Even if your runner doesn't want to stay cool, because it does definitely get tiring to just fill yourself up with ice every 20 minutes down the road. You got to make sure you're doing it. I actually wish that at certain points we pushed our runner harder to do that, just because, there were times where he didn't want more ice and maybe it would have benefited him to stay cooler. But yeah, those activities are basically like what the first night of crewing Badwater consisted of. Drive 2 miles, fill bottles, grab anything else that he needed, and then try to spot him in the dark of the night. There was also, a good note is that as crew, you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Basically, when you're standing outside there, it feels like you're a grape that is slowly turning into a raisin. So you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Got to make sure you also have food for yourself. So this is a good idea that I've got for whether you're a crew or whether you're a runner. One thing I brought with me was a little camp stove, which is permitted in the national park as long as it has an on and off switch. You just can't have any like actual fires in the park. I would hope that's obvious. But I would definitely recommend that like crews consider bringing like a little camp stove to the race, because that way you can cook foods like ramen for yourself or for your runner. I know it's like super hot outside there, but it's nice to have an actual hearty meal here and there throughout that first night and the second night for that matter, uh, rather than just eating like Doritos the whole time. I mean, Red Bull's great, but it'll, you need some food with it too, right? And it's, a lot of runners, even if it's still warm out, are going to want something warm like that. Even if they don't want the solids, the broth is a good idea for some extra electrolytes or just to get something of like a different taste into your throat, as opposed to eating the same gels and, electrolyte mix all night. But yeah, another thing I should note, a really good tip is like you got to make sure your crew vehicle is organized well. If you're going to go to this event, you need like organization is such an important part of it. Basically what we did was we organized the back of our van from left to right by like when you open the trunk, and you do have to have like a van. There's all these rules and regulations on the website about it. They do a really good job like sending out info. They probably send out too much info. If you're on the race, you'll know what I mean. You'll get an email like every 3 days in like the month leading up to it. It's pretty nuts. But basically, we had like two coolers in the back. We had like one cooler for cold food and beverages, and then in the middle of the back, we had like this 3-tiered storage bin. It was, think of like one of those cheap things from Walmart. That's like an organizer. We had one of those. So like on like the top compartment, we put water bottles. In the middle compartment, we stored just like a shit ton of scratch, which was what Danny used for electrolytes. And then in like the bottom compartment, we stored a bunch of like extra ice bandanas, electrolyte, and caffeine pills and miscellaneous items, stuff like that. So, yeah, at Badwater, there is luckily not a ton of gear that needs to be changed. This isn't like a mountain ultra where you're going from like 80-degree days to like 20-degree nights and snow. I would think there's no precipitation ever at Badwater, but I think they did have rain one year. But yeah, there's not like a ton of like clothing gear that really needs to be stored. So that is one of the nice things. But yeah, and then on the left, we had like one cooler with the food and beverages. In the middle, we had all that gear. And then on the right, we had an extra, another cooler to store just ice. And we used that, for bandanas and hats and all the other good stuff. So that's what we did, and we had both coolers like long ways or vertically, basically, to save space. And then behind them, we had all of our, between there's like 2 rows of seats in the van, and then there was some space, and then there was all those coolers. So, and then with that little extra space, we had like our dry food and just a shit ton of gallon water jugs, which you need a lot of those out there. And we also had some space for like crew stuff, like bags of clothes, snacks for us, because we got to eat too, sports drinks, Red Bull, stuff like that. And then in the middle of the car, we also had, we allocated like one of the passenger seats to one of those big Gatorade, like Gatorade, things that you can like fill water bottles with. So, if somebody is listening to this and you're saying, that's a lot of stuff that you got at Walmart. Well, we didn't get it all at Walmart. It was kind of funny. We checked three coolers, the 2 coolers that were in the back, and then the like Gatorade jug thing. We checked all those from Denver Airport, and then inside them, Danny put all his nutrition products. So it felt a little odd, like being that was like the first thing that we did on this trip, which was like checking coolers at the airport. I've never seen it before. First time I've done it. I definitely questioned the necessity of doing that at the time, but it was a really good call on Danny's planning. You definitely need a trustworthy cooler for this event, preferably 2. I mean, I think you need 2. And from the looks of it, like other crews did have a similar setup. So I think that he did like a pretty good job preparing for this. And things, like the storage, that like cheap plastic storage bin thing that we got from Walmart, that was cheap, even though, we didn't need it after the race. We just donated it. There was luckily like a donation area at the end for crews to put stuff like that. So that was super helpful. But yeah, anyways, back to the event, I just wanted to give folks a bit of context. I think stuff like that, the small details are super helpful if you are preparing for something like this. But yeah, essentially the first 42 miles of the race, they roll pretty gently compared to the rest of the course, which seems to really always be going up or down. There's like 15K gain over the course of the race, but like it's all just steady uphills or downhills. So it feels like a lot of the event is you're moving up or down, and it feels like a lot of times like it's not super flat. That first 42 miles rolls a lot more though compared to like the rest of the course. It's flat and a little bit rolling here and there. So at night it's a bit like deceivingly hard, and Danny said that mentally it was a bit difficult at times. One thing that is nice is that at mile 17.4 there is Furnace Creek. So that's a gas station. They have ice that they sell if you need to replenish any of that. There were some cool owls flying around. There is a race checkpoint there that runners need to check into. And you can also get some food. Oh, back to the race check-in thing. There are some cutoffs at the beginning of the race. As long as you hit the first ones, really it just gets easier from like as the race progresses. Because once you hit mile 50.8, which is the 2,000 foot elevation marker on the side of the road. So participants need to arrive there by 8 a.m. the second day of the race. So depending on the wave that you're in, you need to start or you need to get there. It doesn't matter what wave you're in, you still have to get there by 10 a.m. So if you start at like 8 p.m. and you're in that wave, then you have 14 hours to get there. But if you start at 10 p.m., then you only have 12 hours to get there, which is still like a pretty fast 50 miler. So something just to keep in mind. When we were at Stovepipe, it was still pretty dark. And now moving on to Stovepipe Wells at mile 42. It was still pretty dark when we got there. There were some hints of light on the horizon. Over there, we were able to pick up our 2 additional crew and pacer members, and pacers can actually start from there. So that is super helpful. One of the things that I would note is, a lot of people need to use the restroom in the morning. I would definitely recommend not having to go on the course, because basically Badwater, the HQ, they'll give you like a personal shit bag, and you got to poop in a bag if you don't go at the restrooms along the course. So I highly recommend taking advantage of places like Stovepipe at mile 42 or even Furnace Creek earlier on in the event. Nobody really wants to use the bags. But yeah, at mile 42, we were able to pick up our other 2 crew members, which is super helpful. Anastasia, who was the first pacer, she had paced like I think the entirety of the course a few years back. So she was first up. She did a really good job guiding Danny while he wasn't feeling super good that first night. Not like he didn't really have GI issues or anything specific. It was more so just general fatigue. He trained really hard for this event, and I think that maybe I don't know. Maybe his taper wasn't long enough. Maybe I don't think he started out too fast. Maybe in retrospect, we should change some nutrition stuff. I think he did pretty good though, that first night. He said he wasn't feeling great, but he went through the mile 50 marker in just over 10 hours, which was, his goal was to get there in 10 hours, and he was there in like 10 hours and 20 minutes or something like that. So we were pretty spot on, in my opinion. Yeah, I think the other thing that maybe made the first part of the course difficult was that Race HQ is at Lone Pine, so that's at mile like 120. It doesn't really matter if you're coming from the west side of Lone Pine or from the east. So basically, if you fly into Las Vegas before the race, you're going to drive 120 miles of the course before you even run it, which I think that's mentally very draining. But the thing is, even if you come from the west side, from like LA, for example, and you go to Lone Pine, you still have to drive from HQ, where there's like mandatory race meetings the day before the race, to the start line. So like you have to see that first 120. And when you're driving that, I think it's very intimidating to see what 120 miles looks like on the road that you're about to run before you do it. So I think that may be like fucked with him a little bit. I mean, I was just there crewing and pacing, and I will be honest and say that was getting to me a little bit too. I was like, this looks like probably a lot worse than it actually is. But yeah, so with that said, you're also seeing all the ups and the downs of the course. A lot of the climbs are like 3,000 feet or so, or like to like 5,000 feet or so. And like I was saying before, it's never really steep. It's just steady. So I definitely would recommend that if you're training for Badwater, you got to make sure you're incorporating runnable uphills and downhills into your training because, um, yeah, if just because you can like go up, like I live in Boulder here, just because you can like hike up Green Mountain or Bear Peak or South Boulder Peak, which those are like 3,000 feet of climbing that you can do in under an hour. But when climbs are when climbs like extend a lot more, like 10 miles over the course of like a race course, you need to make sure that you're able to like run up that too. That's a different kind of fitness than being able to hike really strong uphill. Alrighty, grab a little drink of water. Alrighty, so basically the mile 50.8 marker, whereas there's like a rest area with like a parking lot. So once we got to that first checkpoint, we stopped. Our runner was feeling really badly there. Danny was struggling. He said his like Achilles was bothering him. He said he was like very mentally and physically fatigued from like some of his struggles early on in the race. And it was kind of a low point for us. It's funny how in retrospect, he was super worried about his Achilles being able to go another 85 miles. And that sounds really far when you're at mile 50, right? Still like a long way to go. But just a good reminder that like you can't think too far ahead of like how a race is going to go when you're like in it. You just got to focus on like one task at a time. Like one of the things that I had asked Danny and that anyone who's like crewing this race, you got to make sure you're asking your runner, what do they want out of the experience? Danny said he wanted to compete. He wanted to push himself. He wanted to be forced to dig deep. And so like while he was struggling at mile 50, it was a good time for me to like remind him that like, this is what you're here for, gave him a little pep talk. Now's that opportunity, man. Now's that opportunity that like you've been waiting for. You didn't spend the last like 6 months running 100 plus miles a week, sitting in a 200-degree plus sauna to feel sorry for yourself at mile 50. Just because you have a long way to go doesn't mean that you can't do it. You can't be a patient man without, being tested for patience. You can't be a leader without your leadership being tested, and you can't be tough without having to prove it. So give him a little pep talk along those lines, and he was up and out. His Achilles stopped bothering him as he started hiking uphill, and he started to move pretty well again. At first it was a limp, but limping stride. But as as he kept going, he started to feel fine again. So really just a good reminder that you can't let the small things bother you. Sometimes those small things do become big ones. Like it's certainly possible that somebody has an Achilles issue at mile 50 that becomes a race long issue, but it's also very much possible and very common for those nagging things to go away after a few miles of walking or running on them. The human body is impressive. But yeah, I have to say, I do have to note at mile, like right after we left mile 50, there was this looked like a homeless guy who was like biking up. It was called Town Pass, is that first really big climb of the race. And he was in a Michael Jordan jersey with a flag on the back of his bike that had just like a skull and bones on it, like a pirate. And it was just like, who the fuck would just like go bike the Badwater course for fun in the middle of like the hottest month of the year? So if anybody listening to this has any idea who that was or why they were doing it, please reach out. I would really love to know. If only we had the Dos Equis guy phone number, I would love to call him up and tell him he is no longer the most interesting man in the world. All right. So by the time we reached the top of that first climb, though, that first really big climb at Town Pass, Danny was feeling really good again and ready to run. So he did. He ran very, very fast. He ran like sub 10-minute pace downhill on that descent into Panamint Springs. So that's pretty good at mile 60 and 115-degree heat. And the descents at Badwater, much like the ascents, are very slow and steady. So it was like 10 miles from the top of Town Pass down into Panamint Springs, which is the hottest part of the course. It's, if you've ever seen pictures of like the road at Badwater, that looks like it's going on forever and ever and ever. this is that road. It's so wild. It just looks like it goes on forever and ever and ever. It's never ending. And it's so hot. Oh my gosh. By this point, everybody's basically going through this in like the day. I think if you're really fast, you're going to go through this in the morning, but like it's still going to be, I mean, it's going to be over 100 no matter what. For us, it was like 115 to 120, depending on like the time of day. We were there for kind of a while, and I'll get into that in a minute. Just, yeah, the only way to describe it is a lot of people do, which is they say that Badwater is like a blow dryer in your face. And I mean, that's an accurate description, but I think that the only way to accurately envision what it feels like is to go there and experience it. It's just like nauseatingly hot. just, just, yeah, it's insanely hot. Like it feels like you're really baking in an oven, becoming a raisin from a grape. I keep saying that to people, and it's just like the best way that I could describe it. Yeah, but Danny, he felt the heat there too. I know he was struggling mentally because at like the bottom of the road there, when like it starts to flatten out a bit, and it does like rise uphill just a little bit. Danny like had a lot of trouble telling if the road was flat or if it was downhill or if it was uphill. It was just so hot out, and the road it's really, it makes it look like with the heat waves, it looks like an illusion is in front of you, so you can't really tell, and it just like mentally fucks with you. It's just a wild road. And yeah, meanwhile, I was chatting with Janelle about how I wanted to hallucinate a Charizard because of my own lack of sleep while we were out there. So I think that section it's fair to say that it got like the best out of, it got the best of everybody. But yeah, once Danny did get to Panamint mile 70, he only had like 2 more miles to go, and he told us that he wanted to sleep and get his toes taped because of some hot spots. So like once we arrived to the actual like Panamint Springs like crewing area where there's like a restaurant where you can get food. I got like a buffalo chicken sandwich that was actually really good. I was very surprised at how good the food was in like the middle of nowhere. But there's like a little medical house thing. I don't really know how to describe it. It was like a house with like one floor. And there was like a little bathroom in there, and there was like some cots in the back. So I don't know, it reminded me of like a haunted Call of Duty map. It was somewhere that you went to die instead of be revived, it felt like. But yeah, on the bright side, there was that food, and you can restock on ice and on gas and anything else really that like you need over there. But yeah, I was able to eat my sandwich while Danny tried to take a nap on like a small bed in that little like, somebody said it was like the medical area, but there was no medic there. So he tried to like sleep there, but it's kind of hard to sleep in like the middle of the day at a race. So he didn't think he was going to be able to really make the most of the time there. So he decided that it was time to just get going. And it felt like things were starting to pick up. It's like, all right, we're gonna get out of here. It's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 120 degrees outside. We're not feeling good, but like we're just gonna try and make the most of like the daylight hours, even if we just gotta walk most of the next section. So when he had made that decision though, he went to like the bathroom to in this little like house to basically like brush his teeth, and I accompanied him there just to start organizing some things, ask him a few more questions about how he's feeling. But then he like gave me this odd look and very randomly decided to lay himself softly, I should say, onto the ground. And then he looked up at me with these very wide eyes and said, "What just happened?" And that was when I knew that something was like not right. He told me he passed out, and I looked back at him and I said, "Dude, everything's all right. You just like gently let yourself to the ground," and assured him that he did not pass out. But I don't know. In retrospect, I honestly thought that like passing out meant that you would have, just fallen down. But apparently, people can pass out even if they gently let themselves to the ground without memory. Apparently. He continued to tell me that. I shut the, the bathroom door in this like public little house thing that multiple people were using to get some rest. He sat on the floor now, leaned his head over the bathtub, and spit out the remaining toothpaste that he had. It was a sight to see and a very low moment to think about like what challenges we still had ahead of us. Another 65 miles of running. It was still like 3 o'clock in the now it was probably like 3 o'clock in the afternoon at that point. 120 degrees. You've got the hardest climb of the course coming up when you leave Panamint Springs there. So the fact that he was feeling the way that he was not uh, as a crew member, it's not really what you want to see. But when your runner says that, once they put themselves together and they say that they're ready to leave and to get going, sometimes all you can really do is trust them. And so, I trusted him. The rest of our crew trusted him. He sounded confident in his decision. And, when your runner's confident, then you let them do their thing. Ultra running is an extreme sport. A lot of people forget that. You don't go to Death Valley, though, and expect sunshine and rainbows. I know Danny did not. So, I trusted him and he was right. And he did a really good job leaving that aid station, not feeling great and still like doing pretty well on that next climb. So that was a very cool thing to see, literally like being on the ground in like the bathroom of this, what felt like a haunted house while it was like scorching hot outside, to getting up, getting his shit together, like taking a moment to just mentally prep himself for what was about to come and get out of there. And him and Anastasia still paced him through that next section, and they did like a really good job just like chugging along. They hiked the whole thing, but like it's good to be able to still like, as long as you can like keep moving forward, that's like the main thing in these races. You just got to trust yourself and just keep moving forward. So that was super cool. While Anastasia was like helping him start, walking up that first part of the biggest climb there. And that climb, for reference, is the Father Crowley climb that I'm referring to. So while she was doing that, the rest of the crew, we worked together to fill up our coolers with ice, make sure that we had enough supplies for, the next section, which is pretty long, because once you leave Panamint Springs there's nowhere to like refill anything until you hit Lone Pine, which is mile 120, which means that for most people, you're not going to be able to refill anything until the next day. So it's going to take you like 10 to 15 hours to get there. If you're going 5 miles an hour, it's like 10 hours. If you are going, 50 miles, 15, so like 3 miles an hour, then it's going to take like 15 hours to get there ish. Right. So, it's going to be a long time before you can really like refill anything. So make sure you got caffeine, make sure you got food. This is for the crew and the runners. Make sure you got ice, make sure you got fluids. Hopefully, you just have a lot of gallons of water that you bought before the race ahead of time. But yeah, so that Father Crowley climb, for reference, climbs 3,000 feet over the course of about 13 miles over what's called Panamint Springs Pass. It is the steepest climb of the race, and it takes place at the hottest point of the day, like I was saying, for most people. So do not take this section lightly. Many people know it as the spot on the course also where the Air Force will fly jets through the valley to practice their military training drills, which is kind of cool. So we definitely heard them out there. They are loud. But yeah, that spot is, like I was saying, also super important for crewing, because you definitely don't want to leave there without like needing anything. I will say on that like climb, that's really where I started as a crew member to start feeling really fatigued. I passed out for a good half hour, but at that point we had 3 crew members and 1 pacer. So, yeah, I was trying my best as dietitian for him to track all of his fluids, all of his electrolytes, and all of his calories that he was intaking. And I did a really good job of that for the first 70 miles. I bring that up though, because if you are trying to track your runner's nutrition, you should have 2 people who are doing that over the course of the race, because, that's a lot of numbers to keep track of. And if you want that information, through like the entirety of the event, and there's really like no race like Badwater to track that at. It's an easy race to track that, because like every time you see your runner, every 1, 2, or 3 miles, you can like write down what they ate and what they drank, about how much sodium they consumed, stuff like that. But at the same time, like it's a hard race to do that at, because there's a 48-hour cutoff. Staying up for 48 hours straight, whether you're the runner or the crew member or the pacer is a really hard thing to do. So I would definitely recommend, if you're trying to track stuff like that, like have multiple people who understand the spreadsheet that you're using, and like make sure that you know, you're not missing any data. Because after I missed a few stops of like nutrition tracking, I kind of just like lost motivation to continue tracking it, thinking that like the hardest part of the race was over anyway, really, you know. But yeah, so that was quite an experience going through Panamint Springs, to say the least. um, yeah, I will say also, Danny and Anastasia, they moved really well up that Father of Corrali climb. They hiked super strong. I was really impressed by uh, Danny, but also Anastasia, showing like zero signs of weakness, which is really like a quality that you want from a really good pacer. You know, somebody who's not going to complain, who's always going to have high spirits, even when their spirit is not internally feeling high. Um, I know Danny was not feeling his best on that section. He said he was nauseous from the heat, and he just wasn't like moving, I think, the way that he thought he was going to. So yeah, you know, if you're training, obviously you got to get your sauna sessions in, but make sure you're also practicing like going uphill, and chugging along at a good pace on like both runnable but also hiking uphill grades, because you're going to have to do that in like 120, 130-degree heat when you're on this section, likely. Yeah, so I did nap. I missed some of that climb, but you know, I saw like the important parts. One of the reasons you know, that Badwater is also really hard to crew is because like it's not like another ultra where you can just meet your runner 10 miles down the trail at the next like crewing stop and like go for a little run while you're waiting for them. You know, your life is confined to that crew vehicle for 24 to 48 hours, depending on who your runner is and how fast they are. Like you can't just go 2 miles down the road and go for a run. There's no trails there. Like you're on the side of the road. The only way that you can leave the crew vehicle is like if you're I mean, the only way you can leave it is if you're pacing. um yeah, I think that's one of the reasons, like that's such an underrated part of the experience, that you know beforehand going in your life is going to be that crew vehicle, but it's another thing to experience it. Because like it's just a lot of stop and go. 2 miles up the road, stop the car, or pull over first, and then stop the car, and then like refill the bottles that your runner's gonna need, get them any food or lube or whatever that they asked for, ice bandanas, and then you're doing that for 2 days straight. Definitely gets monotonous. So bring something to do. Make sure that you have a sleep plan going in. I think that one of the things our crew did kind of poorly was uh, we thought that Danny was going to be done sometime like midnight the second night, and he didn't end up finishing until like the middle of day. It would have been like the third day, because the race starts at 8 p.m. on Monday, right? So we didn't finish till midday on Wednesday. But like one of the things we did poorly was we didn't really come up with a sleep strategy for the runner or for the crew. And especially when you have like 4 crew members, you should have like you have the luxury when you're doing that to make sure that like everybody can get some Z's over the course of the night, right? So definitely go in with a plan to make sure that like your crew can do that, because like if your crew can't take care of themselves, how are they going to take care of their runner? That's like a really important point. And the other thing is, if you're the runner, like unless you've done a multi-day event like a Moab 240 or another 200-mile race, you probably have like zero experience sleeping on the side of a trail. It's not easy to do. Sometimes you think you're super tired and you go to like the side of the trail and you try to sleep and you can't. It's just it's not always like super easy, even if you're like super tired and you've been up for like 30, 40 hours. So just something to keep in mind. You want to have like a strategy for how you're going to do that. I did end up pacing a few miles that second night, just like 6 miles, but wasn't a super fast pace. We took like 2 hours. It was really nice to like get out, and I really enjoyed the miles that like I did with Danny while he was out there. We talked a lot about like virtues and like why we do things in the sport. We talked a lot about like toughness, which was a reason that he was out there trying to really test his toughness at a race that calls itself the hardest race on earth. Or the world's toughest foot race is its slogan, right? So, And for example, like I like a lot of those messages, but I don't personally always agree with the ideology of, you know, the idea that like running ultras is only for that reason. I think that there's other reasons that we do these things too. Yes, it is to like dig deep, to learn more about ourselves, but it's also, I think, to like see cool new places and to like meet new and fascinating people. And to like me, the idea that like people are just doing it for toughness is, I think you're missing out on a lot of like life lessons and other like things that you can be grateful for out there. Ironically, I'll say like when I finished my first Moab 240, I thought that, I felt like there was a very deep sense of like empathy and understanding that I had for other people, which I thought was odd considering how much alone time you spend out there, both in like the training and the racing. I thought it was interesting that an experience that requires like so much solitude can, make you feel so connected to like the outside world. And, I do think that also building off that, like there's like a lot of like pain and like suffering that like you're experiencing out on like these hard courses, but there's also on the other side of that like a lot of gratitude and happiness and empathy that like you can get from overcoming these really hard times. So it's interesting to like really try and balance out like the toughness and the gratitude and the happiness and the empathy with the pain and the suffering. It's there's a lot of there's a lot of feelings that you feel at these hard things. So, we had a good conversation about that while we were out there pacing that section. Yeah, when my time did come to an end pacing, I was grateful to move my body and get some Z's on that second night. I think I was like the only one who really got to sleep on that second night, which ended up being like super helpful because on the on that third day when everyone was kind of tired, we ended up stopping in Lone Pine. I was the one who had the energy to refill the car with like ice and make sure that Danny's bottles were ready to go up that last climb and make sure that he had the food that he needed and like an ice bandana was ready and all that other stuff. So it's another reason why like, it's important to make sure that people are taking shifts in the crew, making sure that, that way somebody's always energized and ready to go. One thing that was really cool is like after I paced to like sunset that second day, the end of the second day, Danny's nephew, his name's MJ, he ended up pacing Danny for 50K of the race. So starting at like sunset, he paced 50K of Badwater, and that was his first 50K ever. And that was a really cool and inspiring thing to see. It was something that kind of just happened like spur of the moment. We going into the race, I thought I was going to be pacing a little more. I think Anastasia did too, thought that she was going to be pacing more. And then MJ came out of nowhere and just like banged out his first 50K, which was like really inspiring. That second night was pretty rough though. I'll be honest, I lost like track of time after pacing my section, like going into the sunset there. I'd run Western States a week prior and stayed up all night for that, obviously. I'd stayed up the whole first night of Badwater, crewing, and then going into like my third night in like 7 or 8 days without sleep was really brutal. Like I think at one point Danny puked while MJ was pacing him, and then two of our other crew members were like, "Hey Stefan, you're the dietitian, like what should we do about this?" And I was like so tired and dehydrated and underfueled myself that like I looked at them and said that I looked at them and I said, I might be a dietitian, right? But right now I'm not. I'm just a normal person. My head was killing me and I could not think straight. And I felt like really bad about that at the time. But, it just goes to show you that it's super important to make sure that like, this is a good like opportunity to reiterate that like if your crew can't take care of themselves, then how are they going to take care of you? So that's, yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah, make sure that you're taking shifts, sleeping and eating, and whether it's cooking ramen on the side of the road or otherwise, make sure that you're fueling and hydrating and sleeping properly, even if you're, I don't want to say just the crew, but like just because you're not the runner doesn't mean you don't have needs, right? Yeah, and so going into that second night, or let me back up and say, I think the reason that Danny puked was because he had like had a few caffeine pills. One thing that's really important when you're at a race like Badwater is like you can't have too much, whether it's water or too much electrolytes, like salt pills. Like if you have too many salt pills or too much water at once or too much caffeine at once in the form of like caffeine pills, which he was using, those things are like really highly concentrated, and that can cause GI distress very quickly. So it's really important to make sure that you're having those things and your calories like very consistently over the course of the race instead of all at like once. So I think that like that was one of the reasons that he had an issue with his stomach there. Um, but yeah, there was that, and then that second night was also tough because he thought he was going to finish like in the middle of the night, and it ended up taking him a lot longer than expected. So he didn't really have a sleep plan. It was also his first time trying to like sleep on the side of a trail. These are things that like you can't really account for, like I was saying before, unless you've done a 200, but you have to go in with some sort of plan, whether it's okay, we're going to stop when I feel tired and sleep on the side of the trail here, so you can do it by feel. That's definitely like an option. Or you can like try and plan it out more. And by try and plan it out more, I mean you could say like, all right, at like 2 a.m. on the second night, I'm going to try and sleep. And having that plan in place can be helpful because then maybe starting at like 10 o'clock at night going into night 2, you stop having any sort of caffeine, so that when you do stop at like 2 a.m., you can actually like get some sleep. It's really hard to do. Each of us will have different tactics when it comes to sleep deprivation at racing that works for us, or that works for other people. There's also things like the caffeine nap where you could like pop a caffeine pill or like chug some coffee or a Red Bull and then go to sleep for 15 minutes if you're really tired, and by the time the caffeine like kicks in shortly after 20-30 minutes or so, hopefully you wake up and you feel energized from something like that. That's also like a decent thing to try. But I mean, I've tried it before to like minimal to moderate success. But yeah, Danny did have like an episode in the middle of the night at like 2 a.m. where he wasn't feeling very well, and he tried to sleep and he couldn't, and what he said, he had kind of like let himself onto the ground again when he was like gonna try and sleep, and he felt like he had passed out again. So that really did worry the crew, and he said at a certain point he said that he wanted to just move on because he couldn't sleep at night. It's really hard to just lay yourself onto the ground and sleep on the side of the highway. And when he said he wanted to keep moving on, even though like only 20 minutes prior he had said he'd passed out again, I looked at his eyes and I saw an ultra runner who knew he like had to do something with his time that he didn't want to do, which was keep moving forward. Sometimes when you're like in a really bad situation, like all you can really do is put one step in front of the other and continue moving. In my opinion, the fact that he had passed out, he'd lay down on the side of the road, try to sleep, couldn't, and it felt like he was wasting time. I said that I think from his perspective, I think he felt like he was wasting time. So he was like, I just got to go. And when I looked at his eyes, I think that we've all looked into an ultra runner's eyes at an aid station, and they're struggling. They can't sleep. They can't get anything down. Their options are really like drop out or just like continue moving forward. And, I think that he just wanted to like keep moving forward. I think some members of our crew were worried that like, what if he falls and passes out and like hits his head on the side of the road? And, I have a lot of empathy for that. Like, it's an extreme sport. You can't go to Death Valley though and expect it to be like sunshine and rainbows. Like I was saying before, there's always going to be a risk, whether you're on a trail or whether you're at a race like Badwater where like you do fall and you hit your head, for example. And I'm sure Danny had like thought through the risks before this race, and he said this was something he wanted to do. He said he wanted to practice his toughness. He said he wanted to hone that skill set, and when he said he wanted to move forward, I supported it. And yeah, it's not always an easy thing. This is why also you don't take your family to ultras, because you don't want them to see you like make risky decisions when some of your crew members are worried that you're going to fall over while you're walking down the road at night. That's like a scary thought. And I have a lot of empathy for that. But also, if you're the runner, you have to know, like before the race, what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do when you sign up for something like this. It's called the world's toughest foot race for a reason. So yeah, I'm sure that some people will disagree. Some people will say if something like that happens, you should stop. Others will say that if your tank's not empty, that you should continue no matter what. There's there's a lot of different opinions on it. Alrighty. Nonetheless, Danny, he did keep moving. It was slow, it was arduous. Per his request, one of the things that we started doing was instead of meeting him every 2 miles down the road after that, we started meeting him every mile down the road. That way we could get better checks on him. And he did have a pacer with him. So, and one of the things that's good is the pacer has to walk behind the runner at Badwater. So it was good that MJ was able to keep a good eye on him while he was really struggling there. The other thing that was good was with that is when the pacer's behind the runner, you can really see when they're actually eating and drinking. And it's good to have somebody like that. It's really good to have somebody making sure that he is getting in the appropriate calories and fluids while he's walking down the road there. But one of the other things that was tough was it was still pretty hot that second night. So Danny was mostly on a liquid diet at that point. He tried to have some ramen broth. We had him getting calories from his scratch. We had him getting calories from his we actually had him just take a bottle of honey with him down the road, and he was just sipping honey. He is a vegan, so I know since the race, I think he said he had changed some of his dietary habits. So forgive me, Danny, if you're listening to this, but during the race he was vegan. And it did limit some of the foods that he was able to consume, and I think he got palate fatigue and stopped eating as much. Things like wraps and coconut water and scratch and fruit, and the avocado wraps. They were kind of, I think it was just too repetitive, and we needed some more options. So just stuff to think about ahead of time. Just you don't want to get palate fatigue, because if you get that and you're not willing to consume anything, it's really hard to make sure that you have the energy to move forward if you're not fueling properly, right? But and the last issue, I think that the last challenge of that night, there were a lot of challenges, that incident on the side of the road. Do you continue? Do you not continue in a situation like that? There's the palate fatigue issue of getting in enough fuel. There's puking and what maybe caused that. There were so many issues that second night. And then there was also the lack of a real caffeine plan. The one time that Danny took the multiple caffeine pills, he puked them up. He did have some Monster energy drinks with him, but they were zero calorie. And in retrospect, I think that was a bad choice. That's a lot of fluid to take in with very little actual calories to show for it. So I would definitely recommend no 0 calories shit while you're running an ultra. You need as many, if you're going to put that volume of fluid into your system, it's got to be providing you with something. Otherwise, you might as well drink water, in my opinion, and just be hydrating like that. But yeah, so there were just a lot of challenges on that second night. But coming into sunrise, finally, your circadian rhythm really kicks into gear and it wakes everybody up. I slept for probably 4 hours that second night, so it was super helpful. When we finally did reach Lone Pine, which is mile 122 of the course, I think I said this earlier, I was able to do all this stuff while our crew, we had a hotel there because the race HQ was there, and we had to go to that meeting beforehand. Yeah, super helpful to be able to stop at our hotel. The others slept in beds. Danny slept in a bed for 3 hours, but we did all that before continuing. The cutoffs at this point in the race are not very concerning. As long as you hit that first one, it gets easier and easier as the race progresses. So yeah, super, super helpful there. Yeah, I also got to clean the crew car, organize the gear, the food, restock the coolers, did all that stuff. Got Danny's food and handhelds and ice bandana stuff ready to go. So, and I even got an air freshener for the car, which is really funny because I was born without a sense of smell. So I got an air freshener for everyone else because they were saying that it was starting to stink in there, which was super funny. But yeah, so Danny slept for 3 hours, and then while everyone else was sleeping, I also changed into some pacer clothes, and I got to close out most of the rest of the rest of the race with him. I was going to say I did the rest of the race except, family first. MJ, as his nephew, ended up pacing the last mile. So I did 12 out of 13 of those last miles. But yeah, the last climb of the race is I think it's not as bad as the Father Crowley climb because it's not as hot when you're going up to Whitney Portal. You're getting to be to the point where you're like pretty high up in altitude, and you climb 4,000 feet on that last like Whitney Portal road section. So by the time you're like up at Whitney Portal and you're like in the sequoia trees that are there, it's not chilly, but it's significantly cooler than the earlier portions of the event, which is nice. But yeah, Badwater pacing is also interesting because, like I was saying, you have to be like behind your runner. You can't be in front. So pacing is just like interesting because you can't really be a pacer in the sense that you're setting the pace. You're just like trying to tell your runner, hey, do you want to run this part because it's like flat or there's a little bit of downhill, and there's not much flat or downhill on that last climb, but there was enough to be able to get Danny to run a little bit more than maybe he wanted to. I did the famous thing and carried a spray bottle with me to like try and cool him off and offer words of encouragement along the way. And to my surprise, he did move like pretty dang well on like those last few miles. So I guess napping and eating food goes a long way, even mid race. But yeah, the other thing that's funny is like there's only three left turns in the race. The first is like at mile like 15 or 12 or something, and then there's like another turn when you like go into Lone Pine, you make a right, and then you make a left in Lone Pine up to like Whitney Portal Road, and those are the only three turns of the race. I just thought that was a funny thing to mention, and it's really cool because like once you make that left turn, then you're just like staring. You're like at these huge 14,000-foot peaks on the horizon. One of those being Mount Whitney. And you're just like winding on this road, and like as you get closer and closer, the peaks get taller and the grade of the climb gets steeper, and the huge sequoia trees start to like appear along the road. It's like a pretty cool last like 13 miles of like an event like that. Yeah, and Danny moved really well through it. It felt like after a really tense second night where he struggled a lot at like at mile 50 and then again at mile 70 at Panamint Springs and then again multiple times in the second night. It really felt like we were living in like the Badwater version of like a Rocky movie where he just kept getting punched down, knocked down and knocked down and knocked down, and he kept getting up and up and up. And to me, that was just like a really inspiring thing to see. Like I think that had everything gone like perfectly as like a crew member, it would have just been like, okay, like that was great. Like everything went to plan. But, I felt like this was a meaningful experience because of all the times he got knocked down and showed that like you can still keep fighting and finish something, even if it's like even if it's not like as fast as you expected or as perfect as you expected in a lot of ways. So I thought that was really cool to see. And then on that last like road, we also saw kind of a few famous people. There was Sally McRae, who Danny stopped to take a photo with. Sally wasn't running; she was filming, I think, a movie about Bob Becker, who was 80 years old on course. Bob is famous for finishing Badwater a few years ago. When he was like crawling across the finish line, it was that was an insane and viral video. I'm sure you could just look up Bob Becker finishing Badwater. If you want to. But I told Danny like you can't lose to an 80-year-old man, and Danny laughed and he chugged along and did end up passing Bob about midway up the climb there. So mission accomplished. We beat an 80-year-old despite all of our troubles that second night. But yeah, as the climb goes on, it does get progressively steeper. Oh, I can't forget. When we finished, we also saw, while we're talking about all the famous people, we did see Harvey Lewis, and Harvey was awesome. He made Janelle had reached out to him before the race, and she asked him she was like, hey, would it be possible to just like send our runner a few words of encouragement? And he gladly did. And it was super cool to meet him at the finish. When I think Danny or Janelle told him that at the end, he was like, oh, that was you guys. And he asked Danny to take a picture with Danny, which was, I think, that was just like a mic drop moment. It's like, everybody usually, I would think most people are asking to take a picture with him. So for him to flip the script and we weren't expecting that, that was a super cool and inspiring thing to see. I think he was definitely the coolest. He's the coolest famous ultra runner I've met just for that. Super awesome, Harvey. I doubt he's listening to this. He doesn't need all this advice. He was what, like this was like his 15th Badwater or something. But yeah, awesome guy. Anyways, yeah, that last climb uh, gets steeper and steeper as it goes on. At one point, I asked Danny if there was, like on a harder section of it, if there's anything that he wanted to remind himself of. So, Danny, if you're listening to this, your response, just as a reminder, was to not give in to your own temporary feelings. Remember your purpose and remember your why. It's supposed to be hard. That's where the greatest lessons are learned. And that was his response. So, words of wisdom from mile 132 or something of the Badwater course. And then shortly after that, I handed over my pacing duties to MJ, who took over the reins of getting Danny to the finish line. Meanwhile, Anastasia, myself, and Janelle, we parked at the finish line, and you can run it in as a team with your runner. So we ran it in with Danny with like a Colorado flag behind him. It was really cool and inspiring, and he ended up shedding a few tears at the finish line. It was really inspiring. Yeah, and you finish like right at the Whitney Portal entrance there. You know, when he crossed the line, we all gave each other hugs and high fives and took a post race photos with well, he did with Chris Kosman, and then we took like a team one with him. Chris ended up showing Danny the Badwater belt buckle and describing all of the meaningful, I think, like references that are in the buckle. It's a super cool buckle. Um, but yeah, after after the race was over, Danny said he wanted to do a journey running podcast, so we did that, and that's episode 19. You can definitely go back and listen to his experience and like why he did it. I think like when he made a comment in that podcast, if you did listen to it, about how like the race didn't go to plan and he felt like he had maybe like wasted an opportunity of running an event that's like so hard to get into. But I would argue the opposite, which is that like the reason that my experience at Badwater, and I hope he sees over time that his experience at Badwater would be the reason it is so meaningful, I think, is because of like all the times he got up when he was knocked down. So I personally drew a lot of strength and inspiration from him, and I hope that he feels that way going forward too. It was a really cool experience, selfishly, I guess, to see someone else be knocked down and get up. But I know it doesn't feel good when you're the one who's in that boat. But it was very cool. um, yeah. Trying to think if there's anything else to add. I tried my best to go through the race experience like from like a crewing and a pacing perspective as thoroughly as I possibly could in this episode. I'm reading off of a lot of notes that I took from the event. Within probably like a week or so of this podcast coming out, I'll also have all of this information written in like a blog form on my website, which is journeyruncoaching.com. So you can look for that there. So there's that. Before I finish this episode, though, I do want to get to two questions that I commonly received after my experience at Badwater. The first was, would I run Badwater? A lot of people asked me that after the event, so I'll give you my honest answer right now. So would I run the Badwater 135? The answer is not right now. It's just not something that I'm interested in doing. And I think when you're there, when you're at any race, really, it's super easy to get caught up in the hype. So, I mean, the short answer is not right now, but I'm not going to say never. My goal is to be in the sport for like 50 years, not just like the 6 or 7 that I've been doing this so far. So, maybe down the road, there's a few things with Badwater that don't really like light my fire. One of them is the fact that it's not a trail race. It's on the road for the whole time. And, my heart really lies with trail running as opposed to just more general ultra running and like road running. Also, the concrete is like really hard on your body. That sounds like a really tough experience, to a lot of pounding on the body, and also just it's super hot, right? I mean, that's super obvious. I think that Badwater is certainly the hottest race on earth. And I think that there's a certain level of toughness and grit that you need to get through that. And maybe one day I'll want to test my mental fortitude in that environment. And I'd be surprised if I didn't actually ever want to do that. But at least for now, my focus and my priority is trail running, and specifically like running hard mountain ultras. I like the Hard Rock qualifiers, not because they're Hard Rock qualifiers, but just because like those really difficult 100-milers, like the Bear 100 and like Cascade Crest and like the Bighorn 100 and Silver Heels and I don't know, like running a loop race like Moab 240 when you're going through multiple mountain ranges in the middle of nowhere. That kind of stuff really like appeals to me as opposed to like a road race. But one day I probably will do it. I guess the other thing is it's really expensive. There's the entry fee, which is like upwards of $2,000, I think. There's the fact that you need a specific like sized rental car. There's the fact that you need a crew for the race because there's no aid stations. So because all those things have costs associated with them, like bringing your crew out there, paying for flights, paying for the rental car, paying for like the hotel for everybody. It's just a lot of costs that add up, and that's something that even if I wanted to do Badwater right now, it's just not something that I can afford to do. The other question that I got very frequently, I think from people, is do I think that Badwater is the hardest race on Earth? The short answer is I think that Tour de France is probably the hardest race on earth. But I do think that like when Badwater staked its claim as the world's toughest foot race, I think that there was a lot of merit to that back like 30 years ago when Badwater was founded. Because its competition was like Western States and Leadville. And I think that, Western certainly has like an argument to be tougher than Badwater, but like, just for the sake of the fact that like my point is like there were not like a whole lot of races that existed at the time of like Badwater's inception. So I think it made a lot of sense to call it the world's toughest foot race at the time. But like when a race like Tour de France exists, which is like through the freaking mountains with 80,000 feet of gain and 80,000 feet of descent, and all those like mountainous conditions that you can experience, whether it's heat or hail or storms or snow. I just think that like that is and the distance is 200 miles. So I think that that's probably got like the claim for hardest race in the whole world. Granted, you can take my opinion with a grain of salt because I have run neither. So there's that. But I feel like I got asked those two questions pretty frequently. So I thought that I would throw my 2 cents in there. Yeah. And that's my 2 cents. One day I'll do Badwater, not right now. And yes, I think that Badwater is the hottest race on earth, but is it the world's toughest foot race? I just think with all the new races that exist today and everybody's really trying to stake their claim for that, I don't think that it is compared to some of the others that do exist at this point in time like that. But good questions. Wanted to get those answered. Feel like a lot of people asked for my opinion on that. So there it is. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. I hope that if you are running, crewing, or pacing Badwater in the future, that this episode provided you a lot of value. If it did, shoot me a message and let me know what the most valuable part of this episode was for you, and I would love to hear it. Please make sure to like, rate, subscribe to the show. This is a good opportunity to remind people once again that I am a registered dietitian, an ultra runner, and a running coach. If you're looking for a coach, if you know anyone who is looking for a coach or a nutrition coach for that matter, please do send them my way. I would love to hear more about what you're training for and help you run farther, fuel smarter, and develop character through the sport that we all know and love, ultra running. You can reach me at journeyruncoaching.com. There's a contact form on my website there, or you can reach out to me at journeyrunningllc@gmail.com. And once again, don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to the show. It goes a long way for me, for my business, and for this show. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen, your very valuable time to listen. Thank you again for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.